Oh, I didn't ask, and we're going to have this on the recording later, so I'll just edit it out. But pronunciation of your last name, Katie, Heindel?
Yep.
Heindel?
You got
okay.
it. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah. All right, and we're joined by Katie Heindel and Vivek Jacob. Vivek coming from CBC Sports, and Katie of hosting Dishes and Dimes podcast. We'll start with you, Katie. How you doing today? You too, Vivek.
I'm good. I'm pretty good. What can I say? Like I told you before we started recording, just coming off a couple deadlines, trying to get a bunch of stuff wrapped before the holidays. Oh, that's a good Christmas pun. I didn't mean that to be like that, but yeah, I'm good. No complaints.
Yeah, I'm good too. Just excited for the season to start. I feel like it's been so long since we've watched Kevin Durant and Steph Curry play basketball. Yeah, pretty excited for that game.
Yeah, everyone else mere weeks.
It has been too long. It's been too long since we've seen Steph and KD for sure. So this game tonight, I'm sure NBA fans all over the country are going to be tuning in the masses. So being that you two live in Canada, I'm sure the whole COVID situation is a little bit different up there than for us in America. I know in New Orleans and Madison, it's, well, basically the whole country has been kind of a hot spot. How is it in Canada?
It's going through what, like ups and downs, would you say, Vivek? A down most recently, or like an up. We're feeling down. The country's caseload is going up.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. They just announced a lockdown that'll be extended through Christmas and the New Year. So it's going to be a quiet holiday season, but it is what it is. When you don't get enough people on the same board, then you're struggling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. We'll start with you, Vivek, on this next question. Speaking of it being quiet in Canada, no basketball in Canada this season. The Raptors will be playing in Tampa. How is Canada taking it? What are your thoughts on playing in Florida this season for the Raptors?
I think it's been a bit amusing to see the jealousy on Twitter of even, everyone was up in arms over a sort of redesign of the logo to ingratiate themselves with the Tampa fan base, and they had a palm tree going and everything. And I kind of get it. It's a sad thing that Raptors fans don't get to see their team, because it's almost like Canada's been punished for being in a better situation, that the American teams can't come over. And so I definitely get that aspect of it. But hey, we talk about the Raptors sort of being a global team. We know they're Canada's team, but I think over the last few years, they've tried to be more of a global team. And if they can get in with some of the Americans too, and ingratiate themselves with that fan base, maybe it just gives them a bit more of a rooting interest.
Katie, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I feel like Floridians are like their own weird and strange and weirdly powerful type of people. So if we can gain, to Vivek's point, like if we can gain some more American fans in Florida, and maybe just some more viewership and eyeballs from the rest of the country, that wouldn't be such a bad thing. I mean, I guess the irony is, like, even if the Raptors played here, fans wouldn't have been able to go to games. They're just like, there's no way our provincial government or our federal government would have allowed for that. But I think people still would have felt a little bit more beholden to them, because just like the feeling of them being closer and in the city. But again, just like the logistical nightmare of teams basically like having to, like, no team could quarantine for 2 weeks and then play the Raptors. Like it would have been impossible. So I don't mind that they're playing in Tampa. Like, I personally don't feel offended. Like some Raptors fans hated that the Raptor biting the palm tree. I didn't mind it. I thought it was kind of cute, like kind of funny. They're making the best of it, I guess. I guess I'm just kind of worried for the players. I hope they stay safe. Like, like it's no joke what's happening in Florida. So I hope them, like everybody else, is just like being careful.
Right. And amidst all of this, it kind of, I've heard some rumblings on Twitter, I'm sure you two have as well, about another expansion team. I mean, if the team from Toronto, from another country, really starts to gain some traction here in America, maybe that means another country, i.e. like Mexico City, would jump in. I've heard them being a little bit rumored about an expansion team. Obviously, we all think Seattle too, but who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, we don't think about these players as people too, in that these guys had to move to the United States after living in Toronto for however long, assuming they were on the team, like Kyle Lowry, like Pascal Siakam for a while. We just don't think about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think with the situation now, a bunch of them are in a hotel room just trying to figure out where to stay and finding accommodations and, to sort of duplicate their lives that they had in Toronto, in Tampa for at least the first half of the season. I mean, I know it's an extreme long shot, but I have my fingers a little crossed that there's some hope that they could be back for the second half of the season, if not the playoffs. And I think that was one of the weirdest things for me when the Raptors were in the playoffs last season and you have this incredible series against the Boston Celtics that's going 7, and it's a series that fans have waited for so long, and usually there's a buzz around the city, you can feel it, and there was just none of that, right? And that was just what the situation was. And so I feel if they can come back, even if the fans aren't around, you still feel that buzz. And that's something for the players too. I think they feel and they recognize, and even Jurassic Park wouldn't be there, which is usually so vibrant, but I still think there's a buzz to it when they're just, in the proximity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and a lot of them too, like they've got families with young kids. So just like getting them situated, and whether or not they even move down to Tampa for the season, like what I kind of thought was based on what they've done for their practice facilities and like the like film room and everything they've kind of set up for the team down there. To me, it really seems like they are settling in for the long haul, like for the season. It just seems like, they've, I don't want to, I mean, I like Vivek, like I hope they can come back, but I also just think it would probably be better for them not to have a mid-season disruption. Granted, and like this is what I'm kind of telling everybody who asks like whether I think it's going to really affect the team. I think it would have affected them more if they hadn't just come out of the bubble, and like had that disruptive situation. I think they were just kind of perched on the edge, and like they just didn't get to go home like a lot of other guys did and are now playing in their home markets. But Toronto, like a lot of them never even came back here just because of restrictions and with the border and things like that. So they're just kind of like in this holdover stasis period, basically from the bubble. But I think they're really resilient. And it seems like they're pretty ready for it based on everything I've seen. It seems like spirits are pretty high. So I'm hopeful.
Right. You got to imagine they're thankful that we still get to play basketball and not be in a bubble this time around. And it's being that they are living in hotels right now, I'm sure it kind of feels like they're back in the bubble to a degree. Obviously, they're going to be traveling a little bit more, but I can't imagine. I know a lot of players, especially the guys like the Lakers and the Heat who are in the playoffs for so long, in the bubble for so long. I'm sure that just gets mentally taxing, and I don't envy anybody that's in that situation, that's for sure. But as we start to look towards the actually playing the basketball coming up here tomorrow, what's the outlook for the Raptors this season? I mean, after making it to the semis last year, losing out on Serge and Marc Gasol in free agency, retaining Fred VanVleet, I'm sure there's quite a variety of expectations for the team this season. Katie, why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're still going to be competitive. They're such like the core. As much as I was so bereft to like lose both Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka, and I guess I still am. Like I'm still kind of trying to piece that together. It's going to be super weird to see them take the floor without him in a regular season game. The core is still there. I think they made the right move by extending OG today. Like I think you're kind of showing that these are the guys you're buying into again, and they've all played together for so long now, come up through like the developmental system. I think that adds a lot of foundational structure for them, which I think is important for the team just in terms of like chemistry and resiliency, as we've been talking about earlier. So I mean, the East is like, it's no joke. I think like the Nets coming in, I'm really curious to see what the Pelicans do. Like I think the Grizzlies are going to be a bit more like cohesive, this year as like just a young and energetic team. And then all your like normal kind of big tier players like the Sixers and the Bucks and the Celtics, and the Heat obviously are coming back with like the biggest chip on their shoulder, I think. So, I mean, I think the Raptors will still like they're a good team. They're not just going to fall out completely. I think like I'd be more surprised if they fell out this season than I think people anticipated them to fall out last season, and they came back and sort of proved everybody wrong in that sense. But I do have a sense it might take them a little while to like gel, in the first few maybe months, maybe weeks of the season. They're not really going to look like themselves because, as you mentioned, they lost a couple of crucial parts. But yeah, I don't know. I have like high hopes. I'm not very stressed.
Yeah, there's no doubt that they downgraded at the center position, so that makes their roster weaker. But I think Serge and Mark's absences are going to be felt the most in the playoffs. And for the Raptors, they know how to win in the regular season, so I'm not too worried about how they'll do there. And let's face it, the regular season rewards meritocratic offenses more than in the playoffs. And so I think with Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam, they'll have enough to get the job done offensively. And Aaron Baines is a great screen setter, so Kyle Lowry is going to love that. And defensively, their core is so strong. Again, those same four guys between Lowry, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and Pascal Siakam, and having someone like Nick Nurse who's going to constantly change up defensive schemes and have a whole bunch of different looks for teams, I have no doubt that they'll be right in there for home court advantage if they can get up to the 2 or 3 seed and get a favorable matchup in that first round. Then it gives them a shot at winning a first round. But I fully expect them to be competing for home court.
I thought it was like super insightful what Larry said the other day in that presser. Like you were there too, just about them being like this kind of defensive monster basically, and then wanting to really like embody that. I thought that was so smart just because like offensively they've lost a step, I think, just because of like the generative, they're so like their offense is so generative from their defense. And when you lose Ibaka and you lose Gasol, like you do lose parts of that. Like Baines isn't as much he won't be as much of an offensive generator. But if they can kind of just zero in and be like, you know what, we're not going to try and fit like a mold that we can't. We're not going to try and like, be a team that we're not really like filled with like shooters, like that's not really our identity. But if they can like buckle down on defense and just like completely focus on that, I think it's going to give them an edge completely.
And to your point about fit, that's one thing that Kyle does great, right? Just making the pieces fit. So with Mark, who's someone that's more cerebral and getting everyone else involved, I know that they'll look at Baines as more of a finisher. And so they'll maximize that, whether it's him getting to the basket or him just picking and popping those threes. And those same looks that Raptors fans were hoping that Mark would put up from downtown, Baines for sure is going to have those shots go up. So if he can make 35% plus, I still expect them to be one of the tougher teams in the regular season.
And now you start looking at the newer additions to the roster, like Malachi Flynn, like Baines, like you just mentioned. I know Flynn, we had a draft guy on, I'm totally blanking on his name right now. I should probably know that at this moment in time. But on my previous podcast, on our Believe Network podcast, we talked about the draft and we talked about Malachi Flynn being a really big, basically underrated guy going into the draft, a guy who's mature, who loves the game of basketball. And he adds to that depth that you already have in the backcourt in Toronto. Do you see him being a contributor? Maybe not right away, but at some point in time this season?
Yeah, I think like he's gonna need to be, you know what I mean? Like he's already sort of stepped in the preseason games as much stock as you want to put into like a preseason situation. But I think like, he's learning in this very well storied line that from like Lowry to VanVleet to him, like that sort of like the trickle down of it. And like you couldn't be learning the steps from like two better guys basically. So I think like, well, one, I hope he is, because I also think the team's going to need him to be, you know what I mean? Like just, he's got to show that he's like a little bit more of a versatile player. And I think I like a lot of his energy. I think they're missing kind of energy guys. I don't want to like I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I really think DeAndre Bembry is going to be kind of important for that sort of thing, just like they need an energy guy. Vivek, you know this. We love an energy guy.
Yeah, and that's why I thought Rondé Hollis-Jefferson might have had a spot on the roster just to provide that, and especially with the lack of center depth, him being sort of that small ball 5 option, it was a little surprise to see that they couldn't even bring him back on a minimum. But with the options they have now, I think Malachi Flynn will be on the outside looking in to start for sure, just because of the minutes that Kyle and Fred are going to command, and with the way the situation is unfortunately playing out with Terrence Davis. And so he's going to have to earn his minutes as a rookie for sure. But I would not be surprised by, say the second half of the season, he's done enough to impress, where the Raptors have these interesting salaries and pieces that they can throw into a trade and upgrade, whether it's the center position, whether it's the power forward position, and look at that guard spot and say, hey, we've got enough depth here. We've got Malachi Flynn ready now to sort of take over more responsibility.
I know Bembry was a guy that one of our Pelicans former guest, Kevin Barrios, absolutely loved. He actually favorited one of my tweets about him the other day. So a little bit of famous interaction on Twitter never hurts. But do you see Bembry getting a lot of minutes in the rotation first? And then I have a follow-up question after that. So I'll start with you, Vivek. Go ahead.
I can see Bembry getting in the rotation because of the fact that he can be a bit of a playmaker. And I think when you look at Kyle Lowry, he's in a contract year. And so those scoring opportunities for him, if you can get him off the ball a little bit, whenever he's on the floor with Fred VanVleet, he's got to be on the ball. Fred VanVleet has always been a better player off the ball. And so if you can get those opportunities where Bembry's in the game, it gives Kyle that opportunity to be off the ball a little bit. And I think he's a smart playmaker in that sense. And then defensively, he's tenacious, and he'll just, fit right into that Toronto defensive culture of getting under guys' skins and just, poking at the ball at all times, and help create that transition game that's so important for Nick Nurse and the Raptors.
Yeah, he's going to be a really good, annoying player, which like all the Raptors, the best Raptors are. And I think, just to add to what Vivek said, like he's also such like a willing passer. Like he seems like he really, I don't know, he's just like really willing to share the ball. And it seems like he's very smart about when and where. And like, that's something that, again, like the Raptors just like, they love to swing the ball around. I think when it moves is like when they kind of hit their stride and hit their rhythm the most. So I like that. I mean, I don't know the kind of meaningful minutes he'll get like initially off the bat, but then you also like when you look at this roster and all the kind of new pieces and where they have to fit and like what Nick Nurse loves to do and just like making a little bit of a freaky weird lineup, he'll probably be throwing a lot of those out like initially just to see what fits, So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets more than he did, certainly like in his last few seasons.
And let's not forget that Norman Powell is going to be a big trade candidate with his player option coming up. And so Nick Nurse has already said that he's going to have to slide Norman Powell into those small forward minutes because of the depth at the guard position. He's used to playing the shooting guard, but if he's sort of deemed surplus in that regard and OG Anunoby eats up a chunk of minutes at the 3, then that's where, again, you're creating that flexibility to make a move if DeAndre Bembry can come along nicely.
Right. Probably go for a big to complement more of the roster as opposed to the depth at that 1, 2, 3 position.
Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense, definitely, with what they've got there, Alex Len and Aaron Baines. So you mentioned OG Anunoby a couple times there. I know he's been in a lot of people's conversation for most improved player of the year, just got that massive contract extension, 4 years, $72 million. He averaged just, I believe, about 10.6 points last season with 1.6 assists, 5.3 rebounds. So a good season. I know he's been looked at as this guy to continue to ascend, and he has. But is this the year that you see him really stepping up, and maybe not being a star, but being a guy that teams know they have to worry about on a regular basis, even tonight for the Pelicans as we look more towards that game now?
I think so. I mean, I think I always say like OG sort of lost the like Pascal and Fred kind of had that jump like into when the Raptors had their championship run, and OG was sidelined for that for that run and also for a lot of that season. So I think he kind of missed out on the growth that he just would have got there by being in that space and like being in those games. You saw a little bit in the bubble. I think he was like the brightest spot for the Raptors in the bubble, to be honest. Like he was my favorite, other than Lowry. Like he's my favorite Raptor to watch. He kind of like, what was interesting to me is that he kind of showed like a little bit of a new prototype. Like we talked a little bit about how annoying the Raptors can be. Like they're very in your face. They're very pestering. Like you always know where they are. But what I liked the best in the bubble was like that in that Lakers game, like OG was so sneaky and like so stealthy, you know, and he's so long and athletic and just like very strong and like versatile. Like he's got an incredible handle. Like his playmaking is getting there. He's just like, if you want to talk about like positionless players, he is sort of the closest, I think, maybe even a little closer, honestly, than Pascal Siakam to what the Raptors have. You know, he can like stretch from the 3 to the 5, basically. He'll be playing the 5 a lot more this year just because of the loss of like the size in Gasol and Ibaka leaving. So I think just like there's going to be a lot thrown at him this year. And I think he'll kind of have to rise to the occasion. I think they bought into him and believe in him because, you know, they extended him to that degree. And I think that's like a good testament to just say, all right, like, you know, you got to show us what you got now. But I just like, based on what we've seen so far, the way he talks about kind of his outlook for the season and his maturity, like he's also just like so cool and calm, you know, like there's nothing, like he's kind of unflappable. So I'm very excited to see what he brings this season.
I think with OG, him not being viewed as a star after this season would be more of a reflection of how the league views stars as opposed to what he's capable of. And he's got that quiet personality. He's going to be the fourth option offensively. So he's probably not going to get you more than 12 to 14 points per game. But I genuinely believe that he is the best on-ball perimeter defender in the league. And it doesn't matter who he's matched up against at the 3, at the 4. I mean, he's spectacular. And we saw him play some of that small ball 5 against the Celtics as well and play that really well as well. So his strength, his size, his length, I think he's a nightmare. And when you talk about teams thinking about him, they'll be thinking about him on the defensive end, and offensive players will be thinking about, oh God, I got to go up against OG tonight. And that's going to be a problem for sure. So, you know, I think, again, you can even look at his contract extension, 4 years, $72 million for someone who's arguably the best perimeter defender in the league. I think that just speaks more to how the league values offense and how we view that. So to me, he's already a star. He proved it in the bubble. It's just more the perception of who we consider stars these days.
And I think finally, just like, sorry, I just was going to say, like, I think that if anything, the propensity to kind of overlook like OG and specifically OG Anunoby and not thinking he's a star kind of works a little bit better for him. Absolutely. It always works. Like, yeah, the Raptors have said like, you know, they work better as a team kind of under the radar, as a team that's like not really, you know, paid that much attention to. They're used to it. I don't think they mean it in like a woe is us kind of way. It's just like they want to just get down to business. Like they just want to work, you know, and I think OG's going to do a lot better just like working with the guys he knows, kind of out of the spotlight. The spotlight will be on him, but whether or not like he notices it, because the team is kind of just like very humble and like really grounded and super down to earth, I think like he's in the best place he can be to really succeed.
Sure. And you look at, there's two things I wanted to address there in terms of being the best perimeter defensive player in the league. As a Pelicans reporter and someone who's biased, I immediately went, well, what about Drew Holiday? But you know, you talk about size and length and stuff like that. You got to give the advantage to OG. But secondly, in terms of the strength being really the wing position and the guard position for the Raptors, in terms of the wing position, you look at OG, you look at Pascal Siakam. That is two players the Pelicans are going to have to match up with tonight, whether it's with their base defense or whether they try to adjust to it based on defensive rotations. But I genuinely don't know how the Pels stop them tonight. We've seen Brandon Ingram make a bit of a jump. The team defense is obviously astronomically better already than it was last season, being that it was just so bad other than really Drew and Lonzo. But tonight, that's definitely my biggest concern as somebody who covers the Pels. Do you guys see anything that sticks out to you based on what you know of the Pelicans and obviously your expertise on the Raptors to watch tonight?
I mean, I don't know why you're worried. You got Stanman now.
Touche. All right. Also, by the way, I keep saying tonight, and people who listen to the podcast know that I always mix up tonight and tomorrow night because I record the night before. So I mean tomorrow night. This podcast is going to go up tonight.
Oh, I thought you were just being very like smart, and you were going to release this tomorrow, and that's why you were.
No. I usually it's been a struggle. I'm not going to lie. Go ahead. Okay, in terms of the game with the Raptors and the Pels.
I mean, I was being honest.
Touche.
I mean, he doesn't fix all those problems that you mentioned, but I think I think what's interesting about Stan Van Gundy is people seem to think of him as a really sort of stubborn, like set in his way style of coach, but he's not really. Like, he really thrives when he's coaching like a younger team, like a younger team like the Pelicans, who are also like really in need, I think, of some direction. I mean, you've got a really good veteran, like champion presence now, like Steven Adams, like I don't know where his like athleticism necessarily like fits, like I think they'll have to sort that out. But just in terms of like a guidance, like he's going to create a lot of space for a lot of these guys who are very explosive and kind of seem to like stumble and get ahead of themselves a lot of the time. It's funny when you're asking about like defense, I don't think of the Pelicans. It's like, I don't watch them because no one wants to watch the Pelicans and be like, yeah, I want to see their defense. Be like, I want to see them dunk. I want to see like their explosive offense, but I know that doesn't solve your problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of interesting matchups in this one. When you think about, you sort of mentioned this before we started recording, who's going to guard Zion. Mm-hmm. And I think on some level, one thing that I thought was kind of successful last season was when teams sort of put their center on him that had just enough mobility at least, and could at least, deter him or body up against him. And so I'd be curious to see if the Raptors kind of threw Aaron Baines at him initially and had OG Anunoby on Brandon Ingram to start, and then just, go from there and see what's working and what's not. At the same time, you look at Steven Adams and Aaron Baines matching up, and that's two of the heaviest screen setters that you will find in the league. You got an Australian going up against a Kiwi, so I'm sure that battle will be fascinating to watch. And one thing I'm personally excited for is Kyle Lowry going up against a Pelicans team with no Drew Holiday, because Holiday has given Kyle fits in the past, and he's had multiple single-digit scoring games against them. And so I'm sure he's licking his lips looking at the prospect of going up against the Pelicans team with no Drew Holiday.
Right, but replaced him with Eric Bledsoe, still got Lonzo Ball on the roster. So I'm not saying they don't have the defensive capabilities of Drew, but that's definitely going to be a big point of emphasis for a lot of teams that are coming to New Orleans or just that play New Orleans this year. I mean, we know Drew Holiday has been Damian Lillard's daddy the last few years, so that'll definitely be a point of emphasis for a lot of teams. But I think the Pels are in decent hands in terms of perimeter defense with their two guards this year. I'm intrigued to see how they hold up tonight for sure against Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry. But the other thing that I wanted to mention tonight in terms of matchups is we heard Stan Van Gundy say the other night that we'll see 8 or 9 guys play for the Pelicans. And it's been like 10, 11, 12 the last two preseason games that they played. Obviously, we kind of expected that, but they are tightening it up as they take on the Raptors here tomorrow night. That 9 spot, to me, I don't know how much you guys know the Pelicans, but it's looking like it's going to be between Jackson Hayes and Nickeil Alexander-Walker to play in that 9th spot coming up against the Raptors. And given the roster for Tampa or Toronto, whatever you want to say, it's pretty guard heavy. And other than Pascal and OG Anunoby, I said that if the Pels go deep, I guess that will get those minutes, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But I guess you also just mentioned you see Aaron Baines maybe guarding Zion tomorrow night. Do you see Baines and Len getting more minutes? Do you see it being more guard heavy, playing more small ball? What do you expect from the Raptors tomorrow night against the Pels?
I think with Nick Nurse, he's been a big proponent of just playing his best 5 guys. He'll figure things out over the course of the game and see what's working. But usually for the closing minutes, he leans towards the best 5 players on the night. And so I think more often than not, that's going to lean towards Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, Norman Powell, OG Anunoby, and Pascal Siakam closing games. And, sure, there'll be a matchup here and there where you just need Aaron Baines' size in there. I don't see Alex Len playing too often. There's going to be the odd matchup again here and there where you need his size. But from a skill standpoint, I think that's the way Nick Nurse has always leaned. And so I see more minutes for someone like a Chris Boucher than an Alex Len. Unless Chris Boucher really, really struggles on the defensive end, that's been his biggest weakness, his defensive positioning, his defensive awareness, getting up to the level of the screen, that type of thing. I think those are the type of things that would take away from his playing time. But if he can clean that up a little, I don't think there's going to be many minutes for Alex Len.
Yeah, unfortunately, because I kind of want to see him play more. We haven't. Like the Raptors do so well with guys like Len, just like basically guys that are always like at the tail end of any rotation. They kind of get to Toronto and they're just going to see more minutes. Usually that's been by virtue of like having the G League team so close at hand. Just totally different this year. Like they don't have that. But I don't know. I'd like to see Len, but I agree with Vivek. I don't think we're gonna like see too much of him on the floor. With Zion, I feel like it's not even that it's so much about size and like going big. It's just like you want to slow him down. So I think Nurse is gonna look at the most opportune ways he can sort of do that. For you guys, I personally love Nickeil, a nice Canadian boy. So I want him to play 100%. I want him to get that last rotation spot.
Yeah, I'm definitely with that. The one thing I'll add to Katie's point of, slowing Zion down any way possible, they could go to a bit of that Giannis strategy where you pick him up as soon as he's got the ball and, you sort of build that wall and just do whatever you have to do to keep him out of the paint. And that's where Baines is going to be crucial on the back end to provide some type of rim protection or rim denial.
Yeah. I think it'll be a good test for Baines too, just of like how intuitive, he can be. Like, I think Beck and I both agree we're going to miss Gasol so much just on like his intuitive defensive playmaking. He's just like a mastermind, and I think like, I don't think Baines is a slouch in any sense, just his mind works in a different way than Gasol's does. Like Gasol was so beautifully paired with Kyle Lowry, who's also like a savant on the floor. You know what I mean? Like he can just see things happening a few steps ahead. So I think it'll be a good test for Baines also, just to like see how creative he can get on the fly.
This will be a game a lot of people are watching, obviously for Zion and for to see what the Raptors are like this season. But I know a lot of coaches and players will be watching this film big time to see how Nick Nurse decides to neutralize Zion. That's for sure. I think he's a coach that a lot of people look to try to steal stuff from because he is such a good coach. And I mean, he's ballsy enough to run things like the box and one in the Eastern Conference, or sorry, the NBA Finals.
The NBA Finals.
The NBA Finals.
The NBA Finals. So we'll see what happens, but I'm definitely intrigued to see what he throws at Zion and what he throws at the Pelicans offense. Now, as we make reference to Zion and as we start to wrap up here, I do have one more question for you two. How do you expect Nick Nurse to attack the Pelicans or to maybe take advantage of the Pelicans, quote, lack of spacing that everybody seems to be talking about once the Pels acquired Steven Adams? It's like, what about spacing? What about spacing? Do you see Nick Nurse trying to take advantage of that tomorrow night against the Pels?
Go for it,
Either
V.
one yet.
Oh. Yeah, no, I think he's definitely going to find creative ways to expose that. I think the big thing for him, again, will be the transition game. I thought when the Raptors matched up with the Pelicans last year, that was big for them, and just creating a bunch of turnovers. And let's face it, Brandon Ingram is a great scorer, but I thought Siakam, had a pretty easy time scoring on and getting those points back on the other end. And so that's something I'm curious to see if Ingram's taken a stride in that area of his game this season. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. Siakam, again, we're all looking to see how he bounces back this season and what he's got in the bag. So he's going to be a big part of taking advantage of those mismatches. And one big aspect that I'm looking to see is what his ball distribution is like when those double teams are coming, or even when, teams are going to go under screens this year. We already saw it in preseason where he's handling the ball up top, and there's a lot of bigs just happily waiting under the screen. And whatever he's able to conjure up from there is going to have a big sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? But a big, trickle down effect. There it is. A trickle down effect on the rest of the offense. Because let's face it, he makes a couple of those threes early. All of a sudden you have to respect the shot. You don't make that shot, everyone can stay home. And so, again, spacing wise, the Raptors will commit defensively and try to poke at balls, knowing that, hey, we maybe don't have to retreat as fast to the perimeter as we usually do. And, if that opens up the transition, great.
Yeah, I think more what I said just about them slowing down the Pelicans is probably going to be paramount. I think what Stan Van Gundy, I mean, you're just going to be it's just Stan Van Gundy, but it's not. But what he has done in cutting the roster, I think adds to a certain amount of organization. I think where the Pels fell short is where they began to look extremely disorganized and super strung out on the floor. And I think, even just by virtue of cutting that roster, making guys making sure they know where they fit, that's going to go a long way. I don't know that it's going to solve every problem, but I think it'll help them look a little bit more organized on the floor. I don't know. What I keep getting stuck on is this was the matchup that Toronto had last year, for the ring ceremony, for the home opener, and Zion didn't play. So I think there's also that's kind of for me, that's hanging over this match too. It just feels like this holdover game that we never got to have, and now we're having it, but it's things have really changed and it's such a weird time to have it. And both teams have changed so much, so it's just different versions of the team basically going back in time to meet again. I don't know where I was really going with that. But
please don't take us back. We don't need to relive 2020 again.
That's true. That's true. I think it's just going to be to your point, Elliot, I think it's just both teams are going to be feeling each other out. These kinds of games are always going to be used by their opponents down the road to be especially as you said, with Zion, and for the Raptors of what do they even look like? I think a lot of people cannot picture them playing right now, we can, because we watch them all the time and we know the team, but they're going to be very different. So I think it's just going to be a real feeling each other out game. I hope it gets to be fun and energetic and kind of explosive. I'm not sure that it will get there this time though.
It'll be interesting. I'm very excited for this game, and like you said, it'll be very different, but also in terms of purpose, in terms of flow in the offense and things players knowing what they're doing. Your boy Nickeil Alexander-Walker said in, I think it was the post conference or the post game press conference after their first preseason game, that he believed that the Pels had more purpose in their offense, and I tweeted that, and that blew up. So. You hit it on the head.
That's a good way to look at it, right? Yeah, I think it's just intentional, purposeful play. I think they've they knew Zion wasn't first it was about just Zion, right? It was we got Zion, and that was the identity of the team, but that's not going to carry you farther than a season. Obviously that's what happened. So now you got to figure out all right, what are the next moves for this team, and how are they going to shake out, and what do you want them to look like, not just this season, but like, 3 years, 5 years down the road.
Right, exactly. So now, as we come to the end of this podcast, basically saying that we don't know what to expect tonight, who do you have winning?
I mean, I gotta say the Raptors.
Okay, all right. How about you, Vivek?
Yeah, I think the Raptors will take this one. I think as much as the Raptors have to gel and figure some things out, the Pelicans have plenty to figure out as well. So there's going to be some of those growing pains that we see in this first game, but I think the Raptors, ultimately their experience will win out.
Pelicans are looking great so far in the preseason, but they also went undefeated last preseason, and we know how that turned out. So I will probably be taking the Raptors in this one just based on continuity and their matchup with the Pelicans, especially with the OG and with Pascal at the wing positions, being that that's a tough spot for the Pels to defend. But we will see. Tomorrow night, the Pels taking on the Raptors. The game's at 7 p.m. Central Time. Yes?
I think it's 7:30 Eastern. It's 7:30 Eastern. So
we're gonna find out right now.
For you.
We have the technology.
It's 7:30 Eastern.
Yes, right. 6:30 p.m. Central Time for New Orleans listeners. 7:30 for those of you in Toronto and in Tampa. Katie Heindel, WTEVS on Twitter, and Vivek M. Jacob on Twitter if you want to give them a follow. You guys, thanks so much for joining the show. This was really fun.
Thanks so much for
having
having
me.
us.